Was the Christian Bible or the New Testament written for the Torah-educated mind to consume? Would have or could have the New Testament been written by a Torah-educated mind? Further, why do we see that Greek gods are mentioned by name by Revelation's author? Today, on the Exodus Project, we will explore and try to answer these questions, as well as unmask the Greek mythological face behind the words in the New Testament.
Back, everyone. This is another episode of the Exodus Project. I'm your host, Steve Eisenhower, and today we are going to cover a topic called Greek Revelation. We're going to focus on Revelation 20 and see that reading things through an English translation doesn't exactly send forth the message. You're not going to get the correct message of what the chapter actually says. So we're going to break down what some of the words in Greek are and show the polytheistic view of the chapter. So let's dig right into it. But before we get started, hit that subscribe button, turn on the notifications, give me a big thumbs up, and check the description for any resources you may need. Okay. So, the Greek polytheism of Revelation 20. I'm going to start in verse 11. It says, "Then I saw a great white throne, and him who is seated on it. From his presence, Gaia, or Gay, depending on Greek or Latin. Gay would be the Latin, or the Greek, Gaia in Latin, and Uranus, or Oranos, fled away." Now, in Greek, it would say Gay or Oranos. That's going to be important, and these are the things that we're going to be addressing and why the Greek is so important. And when reading these things through an English translation, you miss what the author was saying, and it really shows the worldview and the Greek mindset that this is coming from. "And no place was found for them. And I saw the dead, great and small, standing before the throne, and books were opened. Then another book was opened, which was the book of life, and the dead were judged by what was written in the books according to what they had done." Okay, so keep these in mind. Gaia, Oranos. Now these, if you're not familiar with Greek mythology, are actually gods, right? The planet Uranus. All the planets are named after Roman variations of Greek gods, right? So let's move on and see what these gods are, who they are, and how that's relevant to what is being said here, and how that shows the Greek worldview of the chapter. So we'll start with Gay, also spelled Gaia or Gaia. So Gaia is a primordial goddess and the personification of the earth in Greek mythology. Gaia emerged from chaos and is considered the supreme or mother goddess by immortals and mortals alike. All gods and goddesses are descended from her through her union with Uranus or Oranos, which is also the other name mentioned there. And his name means heaven or sky, as well as Pontus, which is the sea, also known as Thalassa, which is going to be another thing that comes up here today. And I directly got that information from worldhistory.com if you want to fact check me. Okay, so we're seeing that. Let's go back to that. Okay, So from his presence, the goddess which represents the earth and the goddess which represents heaven fled away, right? These are gods, personifications of, if you read the KJV, it would say the earth and heaven fled away. Now, how can the earth and heaven flee, right? It doesn't make sense unless you read it through the Greek and see that it's talking about these things personified in their Greek god form, right? Now, these two are linked with life, right? The mother goddess, the sky goddess, and the sky god, Uranus, they came together and really procreated to create all life. So we're seeing this Greek worldview coming through, that you have this one supreme God, but yet there's all these lower gods, right? And even though they are fleeing, right, we can understand that, right, the worldview of this author is that they do have some type of role. They give life, they create life in the natural order, but now you have this resurrection of the dead is what is being talked about here in Revelation 20, and this supreme God, which is over them, is basically going around the natural order which they rule, right? The goddess of the earth and the god of heaven that created all life and created the cosmos through their union, etc. I don't need to get into all of the mythological things, but it's just very interesting that that there's clearly a leaning into of Greek mythology and Greek myth and not a shying away from it. So the audience was clearly ensconced in these same ideas as well as the author. Okay, Uranus or Oranos. Also known to the Romans as Uranus, Oranos is the primordial Greek god of the sky. He serves in the role from the beginning of the existence, predating Zeus as the god of the sky. Once Zeus takes over, Uranus' role shifts to being the personification of the sky rather than the god of it. Very interesting. Primordial gods that predate the gods. Once again, the Greek worldview is shining through these primordial gods, which have to do with really the creation of all life and the earth and sky. This is very deep stuff. Clearly, the author and the audience would need a very, very deep Greek understanding to even understand what's being said here. And you can see that they're being the sky and heaven, by using these names, they're being invoked, right? It's a personification of these things. So there's no doubt that they're using the Greek gods' names. But this is stuff you miss if you're only reading the English. Alright, so now we're going to move on in the chapter. Verse 13, and Thalassa gave up the dead who were in it. Thanatos and Hades gave up the dead who were in them. And they were judged, each one of them, according to what they had done. Then Thanatos and Hades were thrown into the lake of fire. This is the second death, the lake of fire. And if anyone's name was not found written in the book of life, he was thrown into the lake of fire. Now, these things are presented as places, right? Earth, sky, the sea, Thalassa, Hades, Thanatos is death. These things are presented as places or things. How can places like the sky and the earth flee from something's presence? How can the intrinsic idea of death and hell, right, Hades, these places, and the sea, right, how can they all be thrown into a singular lake of fire, unless that's not necessarily the context, and it's talking about the gods themselves, the personifications of these things, right? So let's move on and see, because in the Greek, that's what it says. Thalassa, Thanatos, and Hades. Once again, using the gods' names, and these things have to do with death rather than life. Okay? So Thalassa was the primordial goddess, protogenos, of the sea, mingled with Pontos, we just mentioned Pontus, her male counterpart. She produced the fish and other sea creatures. The Lhasa was the literal body of the sea, and the fables of Aesop manifests as a woman formed of seawater rising from her native element. I pulled that from theoi.com if you want to check on that. So, once again, invoking the name of a goddess, personifying these things, rather than simply being metaphorical, right? It's invoking the name of these gods. So it's, once again, like I said, it's this Greek worldview. These gods and goddesses are in the full frontal view here, right? So yes, you have the supreme god, but you also have these lesser gods, and they are fleeing or being destroyed by this supreme god. But it's not a it's giving them credence, right? It's saying that they exist in that they have to be destroyed or flee from the presence of the supreme god, right? So it's just very interesting, the worldview and the invocation of these names. There are other literatures from, the Roman, Greek, and even into the Middle East, that have very similar tropes and understandings. Very much in Alexandria. I can do a show on that itself. I think they're called the Silladine oracles, or something to that effect. But I hope I impress upon you how important it is that literally the names of these gods, these primordial gods that have to do with the earth and creation and so on, are being used in the Greek, and you don't know because you're only reading it in English. So it's very interesting that it's being leaned into, that only the Greek mind would grasp this, right? And the translators don't help you, because the translators just render it as earth, sky, sea. But death, they do render, the KJV renders death with a capital letter. So it's giving it a personification, using it as a name, right? These are being used as names, not as nouns or places. These things are being used as names, meaning it's invoking these gods, okay? Now, Thanatos, this is death, the god of death, okay? Thanatos in ancient Greek religion and mythology was the personification of death. Thanatos was the son of Nyx, the goddess of night, and the brother of Hypnos, the god of sleep. He appeared to humans to carry them off to the underworld when the time allotted to them by the fates had expired. That's from Britannica, if you want to fact-check me. Now, in the KJV, it'll actually be rendered death, capital letter, and I do believe in ESV and so on. So it's understanding that it's a name, right? A proper name. That's very interesting, that one is kind of leaned into a bit more. They're not covering that up so much. There is an understanding there that this is, in fact, a personification of death, aka the god of death from Greek mythology, which is referred to by name. If you don't believe me, check in Interlinear. You'll find all these things for yourself. Check the Interlinear Bible. You can Google it right now. Revelation 20, Interlinear, and it'll come right up, and you'll get the same information that I'm giving right now. Okay, so once again, another god is invoked. Very interesting. And you can tell that by the usage of these proper names, that the actions, whether it be the fleeing or the throwing, that it's wanting you to understand that these gods are fleeing or these gods are being destroyed. Okay? Hades. This one's all over the place in the New Testament, by the way. Hades in ancient Greek religion, the god of the underworld. Hades was the son of the titans Cronus and Rhea, and brother to the deities Zeus, Poseidon, Demeter, Hera, and Hestia. That's also from the Britannica. So yeah, how could hell be thrown into hell, right? How could hell be thrown into a lake of fire when said lake of fire is supposed to be in hell? These things don't make sense. When the eternal torment, the lake of fire, or the Christian worldview states that the rebellious, the demons, the devil, all that are going to burn forever in a lake of fire. Well, this passage here in Revelation 20 says that death personified, the god Thanatos, and Hades, which most Christians would equate with hell, are going to be thrown into the lake of fire. Therefore, they would be tormented forever. How could hell be tormented forever in hell? That doesn't make sense. Some would say, well, the lake of fire is separate from hell, but the eternal torment that people understand is the lake of fire, right? So it only works if it's talking about the personification of the god of the underworld, Hades himself, right? And contextually that would make sense because you already have the personifications of these other entities, death itself, which is Thanatos, the god of death, the goddess of the sea, the god of the sky, and the goddess of the earth. You already had them name dropped. You already had them named explicitly by their god or goddess name. They are doing personified actions, right? And so it only makes sense if it's talking about Hades, the god of the underworld here. So, yeah, I hope that helped. I hope that makes some sense. I hope that shows the worldview of the author of Revelation, very much ensconced in Greco-Roman polytheism. Had no problem invoking these names, utilizing these names to make their point. The polytheism is at the forefront, and even really having these entities act in the way they would, as if they are personified things, right? Whether it be fleeing or being tossed into a location. So these are being used as proper names. They aren't simply rendered as they aren't simply being meant the way the translators of the KJV, etc., are rendering them, right? It's not a metaphor for death. No, it's meaning that the god of death is thrown into the lake of fire. It's not meaning that I don't know how you could metaphorically say that hell is thrown into the lake of fire. It's meaning that it's Hades. Heaven, God resides in heaven, right? So heaven isn't running away from God, right? Earth isn't running away from God. It's saying that these Greek and Roman deities, right? The personifications of these things are fleeing from the judgment seat, the great white throne judgment, right? So it's giving you a hierarchy of power. It's showing you where the power is, but it's not discrediting that these entities exist. That's the point. So you would need a Greek worldview to even comprehend what's going on in these chapters, right? They're very cryptic. If you aren't reading them in Greek, you're going to miss a lot, or in Latin, because it's basically the same thing. As far as the name usage goes, not the language itself, but as far as the name usage goes. So I'd encourage everyone to start reading things through an interlinear and see what the words being used actually are. Check everything, because it's going to expose things like this, which will truly show you what the worldview is and the willingness to embrace the polytheism that even the earliest Christian authors had going on. Hope that helps everybody. Until next time, I'm Steve Eisenhower. This was the Exodus Project. Have a good one, everyone.